Live from San Diego, this is the Fox 5 Morning News at 7.
Flights resume overnight in Hong Kong after hundreds were canceled earlier this week.
Pro-democracy protesters shut down the airport, calling for the island's leader to step down. They also want long-promised freedoms to finally be granted. The demonstrations prompted more than 20 countries to issue travel warnings to Hong Kong. Now, those protests capturing the attention of people all across the globe.
Financial expert Chase Wilsey is here to break down the financial fallout. Chase, good morning. Thanks for being here.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so let's get to the impact that this could have on the global markets, because these protests in the airport in Hong Kong are really taking on worldwide ramifications.
Of course. And, you know, anytime there's uncertainty in the global markets, and of course with protests of this magnitude, there is uncertainty.
Yeah.
So you're going to have that volatility in global markets, and here in our markets as well. You're going to see the stocks fall, and you might get some positive news. Okay, the protests have resolved. Now the markets bounce back up.
Right.
And again, there's going to be this up and down movement. But the big thing you have to do is you got to realize, I mean, Hong Kong's not a country, but it's a special administrative region in China with about 7 million people. It's not a huge region.
Yeah.
It's not going to have a huge impact on us long term. Yes, it's not ideal that it's happening,
yeah,
but if you have your 401k, you have mutual funds, you have investments, you know, look at where you're going to be 3, 4, 5 years down the road. It reminds me a lot of the Greece debacle where, you know, 2011, oh my gosh, things seemed like they were falling apart.
Right.
Then come 2018, 2019, it seems like a small blip in terms of your
Exactly.
long-term investment plan.
Will they, in the investment plan, you say they may not have an impact, but will they have an impact in all the trade negotiations happening with China?
I think it's a big deal for China. I mean, a lot of people don't realize, as I said, it's pretty small compared to China as its whole country. But I mean, it really acts as an intermediary between China and the rest of the world in terms of finances. A lot of companies, state-owned enterprises even in China, will file IPOs on the Hong Kong exchange. A lot of businesses around the world feel more comfortable going into Hong Kong than they do China just because of the structure in Hong Kong. So it definitely has an impact there.
Yeah, you mentioned Greece. Now, looking back, it was a blip.
Yeah.
But at the time, it seemed like a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
What if things get worse here? What happens if this doesn't correct itself quickly?
Yeah, I think if it doesn't correct itself quickly, I mean, in terms of the negotiations, I think China has a lot to focus on here.
Sure.
In terms of the markets, that they will continue to slide, in my opinion. I don't think we're going to see down 30, 40% or anything like we saw during the Great Recession, but you will see a lot of stock market volatility if things do continue to worsen. And I think the political leaders here do have some rights in terms of how they handle this. Hong Kong gets some special treatment from the United States, in fact, in terms of deals. They have the right to actually say, you know what, we're going to change those limitations that we have taken away from you and actually impose those, because you're supposed to be acting kind of as an autonomous, not an autonomous country, but with your autonomous laws compared to China.
You have to think, Jace, the way that these protests are happening, they're protesting in the airports. It's affecting the airlines. Countries are now issuing travel warnings. 2 pilots from an airline were fired because of their involvement to the protests. So you got to imagine, this is just like, you know, it's like almost dropping a rock in the water and then the ripple waves just going and going and going. What other impacts besides the airlines could we see?
I mean, as you said, it is a pretty big deal in terms of the airport. It is the 8th most traveled airport in the world with about over 72 million passengers a year. So, I mean, I think China will try and pinch areas where they can kind of control areas like that. So firing those 2 airline pilots, maybe trying to, again, hinder some of those businesses in Hong Kong that's not going to make the headline news. I mean, in the past, China has had some questionable practices. I mean, if you go back to 1989, Tiananmen Square, they killed, estimated about 10,000 people for pro-democracy protests there. I don't think they're going to go anything that nature, but I think they will try and pinch areas that aren't going to make drastic news like that.
As we take a look at our screens right now, these are live pictures from Hong Kong. It doesn't seem like the protesters are going anywhere, and you've seen all the signs that say, you know, yeah, it's at the airport, it's a busy hub, and the sign that said, sorry for the inconvenience, we're kind of fighting for our freedom here. This is a bigger deal, and they've selected a place that will get the attention of the world, of travelers, of financial people, and that, because they're fighting for their freedom here, because China, despite the trade and everything else, that's still a communist country. It's still human rights questions. how is that going to impact everything? Because it doesn't seem like they're going to give up. You see them right there.
Yeah, and I really think it is a long-term problem for China in terms of their political structure. Because as you kind of mentioned, China's communist.
Right.
And then Hong Kong, they operate under what is known as the one country, two systems. So they have semi-democracy there. And I mean,
It's semi-democracy.
Semi-democracy, but they still have, uncensored internet where people in mainland China do not. The right to assemble like they're doing now. So I mean, you got to understand, these people, they do not want to go back to a communistic society after having the freedoms. I mean, can you imagine getting the internet taken away from you?
Right.
Absolutely not. I mean, I definitely think these protesters have the right to actually fight what's going on there in China, and you've seen a lot of U.S. political leaders step up and say, we're with Hong Kong on this as well.
All right, good stuff. Chase Wilsey, we thank you for your expertise this morning.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it.